Tyrre, appreciate you hopping on today. Been excited for this one for a long time, especially just with where NIL is going and the evolution of the space and the insurance and the health side has always intrigued me. And I was trying to learn more about it. And Sterling and your guys over at Hot Paper Lantern gave me the little buzz, and I was like, "Yep, I've been trying to learn more about this space." So appreciate you hopping on.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you having me, man. Excited to be here.
Let's start here. You're a former pro athlete. You played for a few years, and then it seems like when you're looking at the timeline that this idea, and I'm sure it was different then than it is today, but popped in your head. Give us a little bit on, what was going through you, that transition, and a little bit of background on who you are, and then we'll dive deeper into.
Yeah, I'll give a little background just where I grew up because I think it really speaks to kind of how all of this came to be. But I grew up in the south side of Chicago, and I always say, like, I've been obsessed with two things my whole life. Most of it's been sports and then safety. So sports, where I grew up, projects outside Chicago, I was where I went to school, and it was a safe. Sports was a safe place for me. So when of all the things I could have got into, sports was where I landed my feet, and I showed up early and stayed late. And then I've always been obsessed with safety because I grew up in an environment where safety was a luxury. And so had an opportunity. I played scholarship, played football at a small Division II school in Winona, Minnesota. Then I played professionally. I played in Europe for a year, and then I played in the Canadian football leagues for Calgary and Saskatchewan on and off for a couple of years. And really throughout that time, I had a ton of injuries. I got 3 bulging discs in my neck, had broken fingers, torn ligaments. Like the list of injuries is long, and shoulda, coulda, woulda. When I was looking back over my career, I'm going, hey, had these injuries would have been managed a lot better. Like we didn't have an athletic trainer when I was growing up. Like, who knows how they would have been managed. I'd probably be playing a lot longer than I did when I hung it up at 24. But I started a company that actually turned into Players Health. Basically, the idea of the company was that we were going to create a communication system for sports organizations. And within that platform, we had an injury management tool that was being used by a few of our clients. I didn't know anything about starting a business. I didn't even know how to balance a checkbook when I started my company. But I had this idea and this passion for technology and for business. And then when I decided to pivot the business into insurance, into Players Health, what it is today, our focus and mission has been around safety. So my focus, and I think about my own journey, which is how do I create the safest environment for an athlete to play the sport that they love? And really, that was the start of all of this, in that we created an injury management platform for sports organizations to track and manage injuries. We started documenting all of the injuries, and then we started thinking about abuse prevention, staff compliance, like what was all needed to create a safe environment for an athlete. And then that really started the journey. That really helped us. Really, I built the first product with a number of developers. I made a ton of mistakes. I made every mistake you can make building a business. And we pivoted along the way. Yes, the business idea today is probably 50 iterations from where we started.
Yeah, that's cool to hear, and I'm always curious on this because I played college basketball as well, and there's definitely, and I think this stat, I think it's wrong, but it gets pushed around a lot, but it's something like 95% of female CEOs played college sports or beyond. But anyway, nonetheless, it means there's a lot, and there's something to it, and sports and business go well together. And I think a lot of athletes, and even more so, especially with NIL, as this pushes downstream, there's going to be even more of a push towards that and more athletes coming out into the entrepreneur space. But there is a big learning curve. I'm curious, like, what were some of those things for you? How did you go about learning it? How did you take those skills? Like, there's great intangibles as an athlete, but business, you got to learn it through experience and other people. How did you go about that?
Exactly. I think the biggest thing that I took in being an athlete, making a mistake is actually not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. And so my focus has been just having a positive approach around every mistake that I made. And so I took them all as learnings, and I made sure that I was a quick learner. All right, I made a mistake. I learned what not to do. I want to make sure that I continue to do it, and then not get too down on myself. I think one of the biggest things that I had to learn was that you can't know what you don't know. So mistakes are inevitable. Learning from them quickly. I think one of the biggest mistakes I made in the beginning was being an athlete in business, you're able to get in rooms that normal folks probably wouldn't be able to get into. And I think prematurely I was getting into meetings where maybe I wasn't ready for it yet. I didn't have my pitch down. I didn't have my value proposition down, pricing. There was a bunch of things that I didn't have right in the beginning that had I developed myself and developed my business a lot more, I probably would have taken a better advantage of those rooms that I got into in the beginning. And so I think, yeah, these are all just lessons learned. And yeah, I just took them all as yet another step forward as opposed to me taking a step back.
Yeah, and we'll come full circle back around to this more around players' health and the product side. But I'm curious, just with NIL, name, image, and likeness, and college, and even some high school athletes now starting to get paid. What are your thoughts on that, just as a broad macro, and how that space is playing out?
One, I think it's actually really good. It's only good when it's being managed properly. I didn't grow up in the NIL era, but I actually was an athlete that actually had access to hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had lost my mom when I was 19. So here it is, I'm going into my sophomore year of college and I lose my mom. I get all of this insurance money and, I'm sitting here with a few $100,000 in my account and I'm wondering, what do I do? And the first thing I bought was a car. I did what your normal 19-year-old from the hood would do. And but I started to educate myself. I started to surround myself with people that knew more than I knew. And I think that's the next step we need to take in this space, and that we really have to equip these athletes and even just the industry to not just think about the money that's being generated or the opportunities that we have from an economic perspective, but how are we building an ecosystem that's going to be sustainable, both for the athlete, but also for the industry. And I think when you have that mindset, you're a lot more intentional about the decisions you make and how we go about creating certain things. And so, yeah, I think that's the approach that I've taken. I take this more personally because I actually know the mistakes that I made. I know the money that I wasted. And luckily, I have people around me to help me make better decisions. And that money, that insurance money, seeded this company. And so had I blew through all of it, had I made all the wrong decisions, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today. And I think that's the infrastructure that think we need to build in to support these athletes as they continue to grow.
Yeah, it's very cool, and it is a huge, as you said, it's a huge head start. It seeds a lot of these future ideas, whether they're still in sports adjacent to them in completely different industries, to have that NIL money. And obviously, sorry for your loss on that one, and it's interesting on the journey. But now give us a little bit on players' health today then, in terms of the product. Obviously, we'll give Ryan Silver a shout out. You're headed to his NIL conference, which is going to be awesome out in Vegas. I'm sure we got some listeners headed there as well. But, tell us a little bit more about what the actual product is today, how you're servicing it, and then we'll start to get into the intangibles around more just the industry as a whole.
Yeah, the core thesis around players' health is that we give our clients visibility of the risk that they have. We give them tools and services to manage the risk that they have. And then where they can't manage or mitigate it, we give them insurance to transfer it. And so how do we go about doing this in the beginning? Sports organizations as a whole, and I'll get to NIL and the pro in a second, but sports organizations within youth and amateur sports, we deal with a ton of risk across the nation. Very few people think about this, but when you drop your kid off for a sports event, there are a bunch of things that could happen or have happened within this space, whether it be injuries that have been mismanaged, whether it been emotional, physical, sexual abuse with youth athletes. We've seen that play out in spades on a number of different large organizations. And then we've seen money go missing. All of this stuff has happened. And what we do at Players Health is we have provided a set of tools and risk management platform to help organizations understand all of the risks that they have. And then we give them insurance at a discount based on how they implement or utilize those services that we provide. And so think of us as like a drive safe program for sports. The more organizations engage in creating a safe environment, the lower their insurance should become. And so we see our mission it really goes hand in hand with in terms of how we provide it. The safer those environments, the less claims we have, the more money we should ultimately make. The less organizations should pay in terms of premiums. So we've done this for the better part of about 5 years now, building the insurance practice for Players Health. Our first year in insurance, we did $1 million of premium. Our second year, we did 6.7 million. That was in 21. 22, we did 35 million. In 23, we did 53 million, and this year we'll do a little over $80 million of premium. So this is insurance sales. And so the value proposition is really, it's resonating in the marketplace. Now, college and pro is a little different, but it's the exact same thesis. There is risk that organizations and athletes are managing day in and day out. They're managing injury risk. They're managing transfer. What we've done is we provided visibility to our clients, to our organizations, to our athletes to understand what is their injury risk. So we actually have created a model that could predict the number of snaps that an NFL athlete will have over the next 3 years. So why would you want to know that information? Well, if I have a high injury score, maybe I should buy critical injury insurance to protect my downside so that if I do get hurt, I'm protected for my next year's salary, or the organization is now protected because they've just put down $1 million for an athlete to play quarterback. And week one, they get hurt. And now we just paid $1 million and we didn't get any value from it. So the same thesis we have with youth and amateur sports, we're providing in college and pro in that we're giving our clients visibility of the risk that they have with injury probability. We actually created a model that could predict the likelihood that an athlete transfers. Why would that be important? And so if an athlete is transferred and I front loaded some cash, maybe I'm trying to figure out what that cash. We've seen some horror stories in the marketplace right now around transfers, around athletes redshirting mid-season. You can transfer that risk in the form of insurance by understanding the likelihood that those things happen. That's the exact same approach that we have both in college and in pro, and helping organizations understand that risk.
I want to use a sort of relevant example, and if this doesn't work for you, let me know. We can go somewhere else with it. But Jamar Chase, for example, he took out, just trying to go take it a step back to help people really understand insurance and how this all works. But do you know what happened with that one?
I know exactly what happened.
Yeah, I'd love if you could just tell it and give sort of the story or some of the deeper details, not on the actual deal, but just around how the mechanics of that works.
So normally with every rookie contract, there's always a period between the end of their contract and when they enter into the free agency where a team, especially if they're performing, will provide an offer. Now that offer is not going to be the max offer of what they would get, but ultimately the team is saying, hey, they're a year out before they enter into the free agency. Here's an offer that they can take, and the athlete has to make a decision at that point. Either say it's $30 million of that contract guaranteed, and he knows that his fully guaranteed portion, if he waits a year and he performs well, is going to be $50 million. Now he's taking a bet at that point. And a lot of these athletes are doing that. Between that end of the year before they end their contract and they enter into the free agency, basically some of these athletes go naked on that risk and they take a chance. So that $30 million guarantee, he basically says, hey, I'm going to turn down that contract and take whatever his rookie contract salary for this year he's going to get, but he's now going naked on that extra $20 million. You can buy insurance to offset that risk. Now, what has to happen is that the athlete has to be aware of the risk that they have. So their agent has to be right there with them saying, hey, we're going to pass on this $30 million fully guaranteed deal. But if we do that, we should protect your downside by buying some insurance. And that's what Jamar Chase did. And a lot of athletes are now starting to do that because you're now seeing, call it larger fully guaranteed deals or larger guaranteed portions of the contract, which means these athletes are now leaving real money on the table, real guaranteed cash on the table. And so the only way for you to offset that risk is in the form of insurance.
Yeah, especially in football too, where injuries are much more prone compared to other sports. And the guaranteed contracts are still, I'd say, outside of quarterbacks, primitive. You don't see too many guaranteed. It's not like basketball or baseball where these guaranteed contracts are wild. Now, going to college and with collectives and then the university and possible money coming from media rights deals and how this all shapes out over the next few years, we'll see. What does that space look like, and what are a lot of the discussions, or what are a lot of the things you're doing in the collegiate world?
So when this all first started happening about 3 years ago, I actually sat on the sideline and just watched for a while and learned and really asked a lot of questions. And I think one of the fundamental issues that I think we saw in the space is the distribution of capital and where it's coming from, a lot of it was donor driven in the beginning, and we know that that is about to start to shift to rev share. But most of the capital going through NIL were donor driven dollars. I'm a donor of my university, and I support a number of other universities. But if there's a campaign for us to go recruit an athlete, and we raise $1 million to go get this athlete, and 2 weeks into that athlete he tears his ACL. As a donor, am I excited about that? We just spent a ton of time and money raising capital for us to acquire this athlete, and now we're working with the backup that we spent significantly less, but we still have to pay out. We started to see the risk that happens around dollars. So yes, in NIL, we're not paying for performance, but in all actuality, we are paying for an athlete to acquire an athlete to come to our school or our organization. So our focus was around how do we de-risk the donor-driven dollars in the beginning. So the collectives now have to they're raising capital for donors to support the athletes. Let's make that job easier for them. So here's an insurance product that you can buy that would actually protect those dollars. If we deploy $10 million to our athletes and we have season-ending injury for those athletes, those dollars are coming back and the athlete still gets paid. So how can we create an environment where everyone wins and we can offset our risk? That was the original idea that we had specifically around this. And of course, as you know, the NIL marketplace has shifted, and we've now had to focus on not just supporting just donor-driven dollars, but we're now thinking about how we can support universities. And then we started thinking about the transfer risk. This was something that was really outside of the lines, and no one really has really thought about this, but there's a transfer liability that the organization has, that any collective or university has season to season. Every season, there's going to be a percentage of their team that's going to turn over. Well, one of the things that we're all trying to do is we're trying to recruit the best athletes. And the only way for us to do that is we have to put the best contract in front of these athletes, the best scholarship. Like, we have to put the best offering in front of these athletes to get these athletes to come. Well, if I do that and I front load any portion of that contract, say I pay them $250K of a $750,000 salary, I pay them that, on a quarterly basis. So I've now front loaded some cash, even though I'm paying the athlete quarterly. And the contracts that we've seen have either been quarterly or monthly. So monthly, I don't have as much risk. But when I start paying quarterly, I've now just front loaded at least a quarter of that contract the day that they sign the contract. Well, 3 months from now, they can say, hey, I don't like it, or the transfer portal opens and they're gone. This policy would basically pay out the capital that they have. So this allows the collective or the university to put the most aggressive contract in front of the athlete and still protect themselves. That's the way that we think about NIL. That's the way we think about any insurance product. I want to make sure that the athlete is taken care of. They're our number one priority. How do we create an ecosystem where they are protected? And so with insurance, now we can sell insurance to the universities and to the collectives in a way that they don't feel like they have to put all of these terms into the contract to protect themselves. They have insurance to do that. And now the athlete now has a cleaner contract that they can sign and everyone is protected. And so I think that's the lens in which we're coming to the marketplace. And of course, there's tons of iterations that are happening because we're learning new things every day.
Of course. Yeah, and I love the focus on the athlete first, because all of us, or I don't want to say all of us, but a lot of us forget that without the athletes, there's no sports, and so you gotta take care of them. So we've covered pro with Jamar, we covered college now. As you come down to youth, what does that look like? What are some of the nuances around that space and what you're working toward?
A lot of the relationships and the offerings that we have on the youth and amateur sports side really comes down to the organization. It's the environment that the athlete is coming into. So there are over 60 million athletes playing youth and amateur sports every day. And there are over 400,000 youth and amateur sports organizations. Now, we're seeing a huge change in the youth and amateur sports landscape with private equity coming in. Like, youth sports is professionalizing. And so the idea that, a concussion being mismanaged, we're 10 years away from when concussions was like a thing and it was new to everyone. It's not new anymore. So how we manage concussions as a process, all 50 states have a law that require organizations to manage it in a certain way. We just ensure that organizations are doing that correctly. Same way around abuse prevention. Unfortunately, abuse is prevalent within youth and amateur sports, but there's an infrastructure you can put in place to reduce the risk that we have. And that's exactly what we do here at Players Health, specific around youth and amateur sports. We support the organization. They all have to buy general liability. They have to buy participant accident insurance. These are must-have insurance products. And then all of the services that we provide to help them create a safe space are must-haves. You have to have a concussion policy. You have to have an abuse prevention policies. So what I always like to say is like, we only sell must-haves in youth and amateur sports. Like everything we sell, an organization has to have. Why don't you buy it from us? You get a cheaper policy or a more affordable policy. And you now have a set of resources and folks that know this space better than anyone that can help you create the best in class environment for these athletes to be in. And if an environment is safe, it's a good experience for the athlete, then you're going to attract more athletes to your program. So it truly should be a win-win-win. But I think we just have to find organizations that are just passionate about the mission as we are.
Yeah. Now, just checking the time, as we butt up to a time question we ask every guest, and this could be related to your space, sports in general, but what are some trends? What are some things going on that you're keeping a close eye on? Just like you were watching NIL 3 years ago, what are those some of those things now where you're like, okay, this is interesting, or let's see where this goes?
Yeah, I think specifically with youth and amateur sports, I'm looking at the private equity space. Like if I had a boatload of money, that's exactly what I'd be doing right now. And we're seeing a lot of it. Like we have some of the larger clients.
Yeah, I want to stop you before you keep going. Let's say you do have a boatload of money. What are you doing with that? I'm curious on like how you think about the space. Is it on the club side? Is it on the tech side? Is it on a mix?
It's purely on the club side. When I look at the amount of efficiencies,
like a 3-step sports.
Exactly, like 3-step, unrivaled. Like a lot of these are all our clients, and so we see these organizations, and they see an opportunity to professionalize these organizations. They are bringing a better experience for the athletes. I think the only thing that we want to look out for is the cost of youth and amateur sports is now going up. And so you create an environment where you have the have and the have nots. You know, my mom made $30,000 a year. She was a lunchroom manager. There's no way she'd be able to afford what it costs for kids to play sports today. And I think when I think about how the professionalization of sports happen, I think it's a good thing, but it's always going to have to be like, we need to have a recreation sports infrastructure in place. And right now it's going all club and competitive. But I think that's probably one of the most interesting spaces that I'm seeing right now is you're seeing, you know, billions of dollars, private equity coming into the space. Mm-hmm. You're seeing for-profit organizations being kind of rolled into one massive organization. And then you're getting technology. Like everything is now being leveled up, because tech in sports, especially youth and amateur sports, was like, it was iffy 10 years ago. And we're now seeing changes happen into the space, tons of investment happening. That's what I'm really excited about. And I'm excited about what AI is going to do specifically within college and pro around the predictive nature of like how we make financial decisions around building teams. Like I sit down with GMs all the time. I sit down with CFOs of NFL teams. We are making 9-figure decisions based on a physical and the performance of an athlete. And so if I'm going to sign a 5-year contract for 9 figures, I should know or have some predictive analytics that lets me know, what is this athlete going to look like? I'm signing them at 24 now. They're out of their rookie contract. And this is now going to take them into their 29th year. What does that look like? And how am I actually going to, like, how do I make decisions based on that? How do I build the best team with analytics and data? I'm excited about what's happening in that space. There are a number of companies that are leaning into salary cap management, that are leaning into kind of the money ball of professional sports and team building. That sheds a light on insurance and risk, because the more information you have around how you make a financial decision to build a team, the more you understand your risk, the more you're going to realize, hey, there's insurance for us to offset that risk and give us some salary cap, benefits on the following year.
Yeah, two very interesting trends, and we'll take the private equity one offline. I'll have some insights there. It'll be fun, interesting. But yeah, no, this has been awesome, Tyrre. Give us website, socials where people can learn more, get involved, reach out, whatever their needs are for from that side.
Yeah, man. Well, you guys can connect us on playersoft.com on everything. You can get insurance online, quote buy and issue in minutes on all of the social channels at Players Health. And then Tyrre underscore Burks, so Tyrre underscore Burks, Burks. But yeah, really appreciate the time, Andrew. Means a lot, man. I'm a huge fan of your podcast and everything you're doing with the content. And so,
Love it.
yeah, excited to continue to keep watching.
Appreciate it.